I guess, our final panel is a panel for this very, I think, interesting conference we've had on the war in Ukraine. And this, I will say a few introductory remarks about the nature of this panel, and then, of course, leave the floor to the two speakers. We're going to focus on this notion of the economic warfare. And I want to say two preliminary questions, personal, and then provide a 2x2 matrix as a context, and then give the researchers, those that actually did the research, to lead us. So the first reaction of the West to the clear violation, I think, of the Russian Federation was to say, we're going to launch an economic warfare. That's going to be our response. And I think this is the first time we've heard the term economic warfare as a distinct concept that was clearly enunciated by heads of states or by policymakers. So then the question becomes, what is economic warfare? How should we think about this term? First I heard about it, I said, well, that's interesting. I know cyber warfare, I know kinetic warfare, physical. What is economic warfare? What is it distinct from what you had before, sanctions and other? Is it something unique? How should we think about it? That's me in my scholarly capacity. As a person, I went to get coffee at the cafeteria next to the law school. And there was a young student, the barista. And we started to talk, and she said, you know, I have a problem. Why? Because I'm going to study medicine in the Technion. And I have to pay tuition. But the tuition, the money, it has to come from my family in the Russian Federation. And there's no way they can transfer the money to me now in Israel. She's an Israeli citizen. To me now in Israel. So I can pay the Technion to begin my medical training. I had no idea. What do I do? So that said, okay, so that told me that, okay, there's an issue here of how should we think about the relationship between states and individuals in the citizens of the state, but sometimes who find themselves outside the borders of the state, especially given the globalization or the new world order, so to speak. I mean, it's an exaggeration to say it's a new order, but let's say the world order we find ourselves in, where nationals of nation states, to the extent that there are nation states, live outside the nation state and have to be recognized. So these are my two introductory comments on a personal level. Now, more, if we look at it more systemically, the 2x2 matrix I wanted to propose is first to look at the institutions that issue or that lead the warfare. So it could be states, and then they use sanctions. And we're going to hear more about sanctions. It's a question that becomes, what are the laws of sanctions, substantive laws and sanctions, government sanctions, and what are the institutions in place that are there to supervise that the laws of sanctions, whatever these laws may be, are indeed adhered to. And again, let's talk about what the laws should be. Is proportionality part of this? Is it not? When it comes to proportionality, do you measure it vis-a-vis the state or vis-a-vis the citizens of the state? Are there exceptions to sanctions? Are some sanctions illegitimate, and why? And again, who supervises it? That is the institution, and then the substantive and institutional with respect to state-led sanctions. But we are in an interesting position now, because some what we call sanctions or elements of the warfare of the economic action were led by transnational corporations, not necessarily as agents of state. It is not because there was a sanction, a state-led sanction, and then the corporation said, look, I'm incorporated in a certain state, I have to follow the rules, and therefore I can't do business with you. Not necessarily. Some corporations said, no, we have made either a business decision or an ethical decision, or well, that says we can no longer do business here or with you. And then again, a mirror image emerges. What are the laws with respect to these kind of sanctions that are led by multinational corporations? Similar to state-based laws or not? And again, what are the institutions that should supervise the applications of these sanctions? What are they? Are they institutions that are there to govern states or just govern the economic dimension? Courts of different kinds, if at all. For example, let's just give it. So, if I'm a corporation and I have business in Russia and I decide to withdraw from Russia, do I have a duty to my employees? For example, if they lose medical coverage. Or maybe that's the whole point of sanctions. No, they have to suffer. Oh, wait, they also have human rights. And I'm tying it here because I've said enough. To the extent that it's warfare, if one thing we know about warfare is the principle of distinction between the state and civilians, or the armed forces and civilians. To what extent there should be a principle of distinction in the economic warfare that should say, okay, if there is, should there be a medical exception, going back to my ballista, should there be some exceptions to rules, either state-issued rules in terms of sanctions, or multinational corporations rules that says, with respect to this particular person who will be denied, you cannot have access to funds for medical reasons. They're outside seeking medical, they have to pay, they can't because they can't get money. Rather, should there be a system of exceptions because of the principle of distinction between civilians or because of the principle of proportionality, etc. So it's a fascinating, I think, subject that hasn't been discussed much in the international law literature, and we have wonderful two speakers that will address it. I will just give the floors to Dr. Irina Bogdanova from the University of Bern and the World Trade Institute, and then Dr. Matthias Goldman from EBS Universitat, who's going to be joining us online. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much.